Good morning. Nice to see you all. We've got a whole new set of rules here. Seems to change by the week, right? It's almost back to school time, which many of you know, and all the students are getting their summer reading books ready for their book reports. And so being a teacher, I was inspired to do the same thing. So our truth lessons for the next month or so are going to revolve around various community books. And mine today is revolving around Reverend Robert Brummett's Unity Classic, Finding Yourself in Transition. Why this book? Because I think all of us have been in a state of flux and transition for the last year and a half. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, very few of us have been not in flux. The whole world has been in transition and flux. It's not just us, and we could all use some enlightened guidance from the modern father of unity counseling and wisdom. Reverend Robert Brummett's book embodies a distillation of the most profound of the Western and Eastern wisdoms, modern psychology and science. You all may remember from when Robert Brummett was here with us for a month. He is a former physics and math professor. He knows his stuff, and he knows how to clearly convey his ideas. This book, Finding Yourself in Transition, obvious from the title, is about change, which we've all been dealing with. We've kind of all been thrust into myriad changes in the last couple of years of various kinds, and there have been upheavals on our planet, in our country, in our personal lives, and certainly in the economy, our personal and country economy, and we could all use some help negotiating these changes more wisely, more easily, and more effectively. Brummett helps us kind of reframe the way we see these political, medical, societal, and international changes and see them through a different lens. He helps us change. He helps us change by seeing things differently. And he wants us to start looking at changes, be they big or little, not as little or big tragedies, but as an opportunity to grow. Not as a block to our happiness, but as lessons that we can all embrace. I mean, this is a whole new way to look at all these changes we've been dealing with, big or little. And he mainly wants us to not feel like we have to run from them, because they're there. It's all a part of the fascinating game of life. It's a game. And I would add here that we aren't playing the game alone. We have each other. We're playing it together. We're a big sangha that works together. There's support here, not only here with each other, but there are enlightened teachers and game champions who have left the rules for us in various ways, and all we need to do is practice. And I know all of you, I know so many of you and what you're reading and what you've studied, and you have these tools, you have this great teaching in various ways, but now what we need to do is use them. We know the rules of the game, we just have to play the game, and that takes practice. And remember, all this, it's not about the information, it's about our transformation. Thank you. Okay. Unity is about practical spirituality, and there is nothing more practical than the tried and true tools that help us build our lives, whether it be a little renovation of our lives or a whole new life. And that's what Robert Brummett's book is about. It gives us tools to convert all these changes we're encountering and convert them into a transition to a higher, more meaningful, and better life, no matter what it is. I'd like to start with what Rosemary Fillmore Ray says at the very beginning of the book. Rosemary is the granddaughter of Unity co-founders Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. She says, and I quote, "The keynote of life is change. The tadpole becomes a frog. The larva becomes a magnificent monarch butterfly. The leaves die and fall down once again to come alive. It is the ebb and flow of nature. The patterns of our days are marked by endings and new beginnings. When change comes rapidly in our individual lives, we may question the meaning and purpose of what we are experiencing." And I think that's something we've all done. She continues, "That's why I'm so excited about Reverend Brummett's book, Finding Yourself in Transition. He addresses here the ebbs and flows in our lives with his gentle wisdom and clarity of thought. He shows us ways to move courageously and victoriously through the necessary but often unsettling transitions that are a part of our growth and development. Everything is grist for the mill." She didn't say that. I'm sorry. I said that. She continues, "When my grandparents, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, began Unity, they desired to establish a school of what they called practical Christianity. In their search for truth, they explored many philosophies and religions to develop what has become the Unity way of life. Reverend Brummett follows the same spirit of practical spirituality. Drawing on many sources, Reverend Brummett masterfully weaves together strains of psychology, Eastern and Western mysticism, Bible interpretations, and personal history to bring us a new version of contemporary practical spirituality. Practical spirituality." End of quote. These ebbs and flows of life that Rosemary referred to may be the big changes like dealing with coronavirus, political unrest, which we're all dealing with in America, or maybe a Hurricane Katrina type event. Or it can be just a little change, like stresses that erupt in the family or in the workplace on a daily basis. But we can negotiate all this with more ease and wisdom and even convert it to our advantage. Kind of like, isn't it in judo where the master uses the opponent's force to win? Nobody's nodding yes or no, but remember, life is a school. Assignments, whatever they are, big or little, assignments help us learn and grow. They need never defeat us. And that's what all these little events are that happen in our lives. They can become assignments to help us learn. But Reverend Brummett teaches, all too often we see life's challenges and changes as a tragedy from which we have to recover and as fast as possible so that life can return to normal. We are programmed to resist change. It's uncertain, it's scary, and we have little faith in the process. That's why our first reflex, he says, is to consider change and challenges as bad. And we want things to go back to the way they were as soon as possible. Reverend Brummett quoted the American transcendentalist poet Walt Whitman, snippets of which I'd like to share today because it explains in poetry what unity teaches, which is that with right understanding and an evolved consciousness, the whole world is ours. And life is a magnificent school with top professors that have come before us. A school where we can truly educate ourselves, not just be trained to fit in the cogs of society's economic machinery. Whitman writes in Leaves of Grass, which I grew up with that book on my coffee table in the living room. I never appreciated it. He starts with, Allons, let's go. Whoever you are, come travel with me. I swear to you, there are divine things more beautiful than words can tell. I do not offer the old, smooth prizes, but the rough, new prizes. You shall be treated to the ironical and mocking smiles of those who remain behind you. Merge in the start of superior journeys. Enjoy all without labor or purchase. To know the universe itself as a road for traveling souls. And that's the roadmap that Reverend Brummett presents to us, a blueprint for our evolution, our rebirth, a guidance to ultimate abundance and joy, peace, freedom, and health. We don't have to wait for our outer environment and other people to be like we want them to be. We can use all situations to our advantage. Reverend Brummett starts by reminding us that change is the one constant in life. I think we forget that all too often. It's an inevitable part of our human existence, not something to deny or to avoid or to run from. But it's not easy because the body normally resists change, and we now experience more changes in just a few years than our ancestors did in a lifetime. And we have little in our education that helps us cope, and I can tell you that for sure, being a high school teacher. There is very little in the educational system that helps us learn to cope with life. Brummett says that at one time in history, the purpose of education was for the personal growth of the individual, to learn how to bring forth the best in us. The word education is derived from the Latin word educare, which means to draw out what is in us, and we all know at Unity, the divine is what's in us. Education was intended at one time to draw out our innate, unique wisdom, but today we tend to see education as primarily for the purpose of developing marketable skills and economic productivity rather than for self-development and survival in our personal life. The drawing out of one's inner wisdom has been thus relinquished in favor of a putting in of information and skills that seem marketable. The needs of the individual have been usurped by the system. The needs of the system. Thus, few of us get educated. We get trained to fit into the system, but not educated. Thus, we really have few coping skills to deal with these changes and these problems. Yet life's myriad changes keep on coming, and we are forced to deal with them without adequate tools. The first tool is a major unity principle, the wisdom to know that it's never so much what happens out there that needs to be dealt with as the meaning we give to what happens. Winky was just saying this morning, she had read or heard somewhere, that it's 10% what's happening and 90% the way we see it. Every change feels like a little death. It's a death, a loss of the old predictable life that we had. But this change is also exactly what gives us a chance to give birth to a new, improved life. Reverend Brummett says to live is to grow is to change is to die to the old. So all day, every minute, we can be dying to the old if we can use these changes and problems. Jesus said to his disciples, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Think about it. What if the grain of wheat just stuck onto the old vine and just withered with it the way that it was? It would never die and then fall and flower again as new wheat. How often we cling to the old worn-out vine or system instead of just letting ourselves die to the old, fall as a mere seed and then grow again in all our splendor, renewed. Often dreaded changes furnish this opportunity. The Apostle Paul, who was no stranger to change, said in 1 Corinthians, I die every day. We too must be willing to die daily, even moment by moment, existentially. To resist this death is to resist life and freedom, the freedom to become and to flourish in new ways, like the new wheat. Reverend Brennett helps us see these big or little changes in our lives not as chaos or suffering, but more as a rite of passage, which many of you have studied with Joseph Campbell. In other words, from one state of consciousness to another, a rite of passage. He says these problems and changes in our lives are kind of like whitewater rafting on a canoe trip. The whitewater can be difficult and dangerous at times, but it can also be very exciting, and it gets us to our destination even faster. He reminds us of the Chinese word for crisis, which means danger and opportunity, both. Reverend Brevett says that at those times of crisis-producing events or changes in our lives, we can learn to minimize the pain and facilitate the birth of a new us. How? 1, notice what's happening. Be here now, as Ram Dass says. Accept that there is some change that's going on that is stressful or scary or painful. It's going on in your life. Notice what's happening. 2, don't run from the pain. Many people get good at that in very dangerous ways, including alcohol and drug addiction, denial, which causes mental problems, and continually running away from painful situations only to find the same thing over and over wherever they run to. Or we blame the outside world, and we get so identified with our anger that we don't deal with the problem, which means that we'll continue to suffer every time we're faced with a similar problem. So don't run from the pain. 3, get actively involved in the transition process, which is to accept the ending of something in your life. To prepare yourself to voyage through a temporary void or unknown. We just don't know what to do about it. That's okay. And 3, to embrace the new beginning. In ancient times, this whole process was what was known as a rite of passage. He suggests that we look at every change, disaster, or even little stress in your life as a rite of passage. Anthropologists have recognized that each rite of passage has 3 stages: a separation stage, the initiation stage, and the return stage. The separation stage is when the initiate is removed from the order of things and undergoes a symbolic death, like the American Indians used to send their young sons out into the forest alone for a period of time. The separation stage. The initiation stage is when the individual is sent away from the tribe or village and has to confront and experience something not formerly known. Joseph Campbell calls that facing the dragon in our lives. And the return phase is when the individual is reintegrated back into the old societal order, but as a totally new person. In the American Indian societies, that's when the young boy was considered a warrior. Although the term initiation isn't used specifically in the Bible, there are many stories and processes that allude to this. Jesus had several experiences that have been referred to as initiations. Remember, he was led out into the wilderness and tempted by the devil for 40 days and 40 nights, but he emerged empowered and began his public ministry. Another rite of passage is when he endured crucifixion, burial, and resurrection and emerged more powerful than ever before. The Apostle Paul had his own experience of initiation, after which he said, "It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me." He called others to do the same, saying, "Put off your old nature, which belongs to your former life, and be renewed after the likeness of God." To quote from Star Trek, the hero is able to go where no one has gone before. So, separation, initiation, and return. And every change or crisis in your life can serve as this type of rite of passage for you. I see coming to spiritual services like now on Sunday mornings as a mini rite of passage. We leave our old environment. We encounter new ways of seeing and a whole new dimension of life, sometimes it's even a little foreign to us, which is like an initiation, and then we return to that old life, but as a completely different person. Change can be a real opportunity for growth. Some opportunities we purposely choose, like maybe a 10-day Vipassana retreat of sitting in meditation 8 hours a day. Some changes are thrust on us, which has been the case the last couple of years, like health, emotional, political upheavals. But change can always be used as a rite of passage, which can bring understanding that is a real breakthrough in our lives, the birth of a new and better version of ourselves when we overcome it. We gain strength we never knew we had. This month, we'll be talking more about the initiation period of the rite of passage, this void, this unknown. And we'll also be talking about the fun part, which is the beginning of the new. But for this week, just notice the beginning of the process, your homework, so to speak. Start noticing all the times during the day that you feel like you're faced with a change, a crisis, a challenge of some kind. Relinquish seeing them as tragedies. Treat each one like a new opportunity for your transition, a chance for you to grow, a chance for you to change from the status quo. The death of a former life, small or big, but can also be the beginning of a rebirth of a new, healthier, better, more joyful, happier you. Ernest Hemingway once said, talk about book reports, the world breaks everyone, and afterwards some are strong at the broken places. And I might add that when we get strong at the broken places, the next time the same thing happens, we won't break there. Bottom line, in terms of life's small or big changes, face up to the problem. Don't deny it. You have lost something in your life, a friend's support, belief in something you counted on, maybe your government leaders, maybe a way of life or a job, but don't deny it. Face up to your problem. 2, don't run from the problem. Accept that you are in the midst of transition of mind, body, or soul. It may feel disorienting for a while. That's okay. That's where faith comes in. There are blueprints and guides for this, which is one reason you come to church. Don't blame, escape, or forget that change is the only absolute in life. So don't run from the problem. I'm sure all the things you read and watch on YouTube spiritually say the same thing, but bring it home to your life. Face the problem, don't run from the problem. And 3, look at the situation of loss or change as a rite of passage for you, a chance, like with whitewater rafting, to enjoy some excitement and go faster to your destination. Maybe you can think of your problems and changes as like this tiny dot on this big piece of white paper. Can everybody see this little dot in the middle of it? Imagine that that is your problem. Okay? Often, all we notice is the dot. We don't notice the huge expanse of white paper around it. That's what the problems and changes are. A little dot, but on a large expanse of white paper full of possibilities. But we just focus on that problem. So go forth this week and embrace the dot. Embrace it. And remember that it dwells in a sea of opportunity to transition to a better and more fulfilling level of life. So your homework is, be present, be here now. Notice your problems and the changes in your life. And remember that they're okay. They're all grist for the mill for your transition to a better you. The School of Life will give you lessons, that's for sure, but it will also give you the answers if you just stay in the class. And the class is all that you read and talk about with your spiritual friends or watch on YouTube. And don't forget, there are teachers who have mastered these lessons of life and graduated, and they have left us their notes. That's what all the Holy Scriptures are about. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And enjoy the game of life. It's like your wheel of fortune. Thank you.